Hey everyone, welcome to the Cash Flow Crunch, optimizing your working capital, presented by Wayflyer. We're so excited to have you here today and really appreciate you taking the time to join us. I just want to cover a couple of housekeeping items before we jump right in. You'll notice some tabs in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can submit questions, chat, and we encourage you to do that. We will have some time for Q&A at the end of the session. And this session is being recorded. So if you have to step away or can't make it the full 45 minutes, we'll send the recording out afterwards. Or, if you want to send it to a colleague who missed the session, feel free to do so. So with those things covered, we'll jump right in here. Here's just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. We'll introduce ourselves and why we're here talking about the cash flow crunch today. We'll talk a little bit about Finance 101, very lightly covered. And then we'll talk about once you get capital, what can we do to turn that into customers? We'll talk about expanding operations and the logistics involved in that. And then we'll cover a couple of key takeaways. So we'll jump into some introductions here. My name is Mary Kate Cash. I am your host moderator today. I'm the head of partner marketing at Wayflyer, and I'm thrilled to be joined here with two of our partners. And I'll let them introduce themselves. So I'll pass it to you first, Jordan.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Jordan. I am the head of growth at Growth It, which is a boutique marketing agency. We focus primarily on Shopify stores and e-commerce D2C, though we do other things as well. And my background is deepest in paid media. So that is a huge piece of the puzzle as you're trying to grow your business and where you deploy cash. So excited to get into the nitty gritty about what you should know when doing that.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you here. And now I'm going to hand it to Brian to introduce himself as well.
Hi, I'm Brian Burke. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Seko Logistics. Seko is a freight forwarder and 3PL. We work with a number of direct-to-consumer brands that are looking or have decided to expand around the world. And so what we do is once these brands select their financial partners like Wayfinder and their marketing agencies like Growth It, we're the ones that come in and actually execute the logistics of that expansion on behalf of brands, both here in the United States and around the world.
Thanks. And we're so happy you could join us today. So now that everybody knows everybody, we'll jump right in here and we'll get a little bit into Finance 101 here. What are your options and why do you need it? Even the best brands face cash flow issues. I think that can be a little bit of a misconception. I think a lot of the best brands face cash flow issues. And as a financing partner for over 5,000 brands, we at Wayflyer see common challenges time and time again. There's this period of rapid growth, and it creates just as many demands as it does opportunities. So if you think about it, when sales spike, so does the need for more inventory, faster shipping, stronger marketing, and better technology, better processes, better platforms that can help you fulfill these needs. But revenue can often lag behind these upfront costs. Traditional lenders can be slow, while other providers can lack the expertise and precision required to really understand your business. And that's where our financing comes in. Our goal is to help brands bridge the gap, providing working capital that they need to stay ahead of demand, keep customers happy, and continue growing without that disruption in cash flow. So as your brand scales, your financing needs change. They evolve, and we've designed our solutions to evolve alongside of your growth. Whether you're managing seasonal demand or planning for long-term growth or looking for continuous access to capital, we have a full suite of options. So first up is our merchant cash advance. This option is ideal for smaller or seasonal brands. Repayments are revenue-based, which means that you pay more when sales are strong and less when they dip, so that we don't put you in a tight spot with cash flow. It's unsecured and it comes with one transparent fee, so there's no surprises and no hidden costs. Next is our most common product, which is the term loan. This is perfect for brands that are looking for predictability and the ability to look forward and have the ability to plan ahead. It features fixed repayments over like 3 to 9 months with the same flexible repayment cadence, either daily or weekly or biweekly. And like the cash advance, it comes with a clear upfront fee, zero hidden charges. And lastly, for a more mature, faster moving brand, we offer rolling financing. And this gives you repeat access to either our cash advance or term loan products over a 12-month time period. So you don't need to reapply each time. So it's financing on your terms designed for ongoing growth. So that was just a little bit of a 101 on financing and what the options are. Now I want to turn to a very practical question, which is, okay, I've got my capital. Now what do I do? What do I do with it? How do I drive growth? How do I turn this into customers and really put it to work? So Jordan, I'm going to hand it to you. Talk to us about putting that capital to work.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary Kate. Yes, we have to go out and find people who want our products so we can grow our business. My portion of the presentation, first we're going to cover some vegetables, business foundations that are going to help you guide your strategy and tactics. These are the things that founders I work with often avoid or feel overwhelmed by. So we're going to try to make it super simple, but eating our vegetables is super important so we're resilient in the future. Then we'll get to kind of desserts and have some quick hit case studies that will be able to inspire you. My intention is that some of these are things that you might be able to go and implement right away on your own with reasonably low efforts. And along the way, I have a few homework assignment slides that if you want to screenshot them, I know you'll be getting the slides later too, but these are exercises that I wish every founder would do before coming and working with someone like my team so that they really understand what their position is and how we need to adapt to meet the business needs. And then at the end, we have a few free resources for you, so you can do those. All right. So, annoying disclaimer, there's no way we can possibly address all of the nuances of everyone's situation in 15 minutes. I'm going to do my best to give you as much info as possible, but the context does matter deeply. And before we get into it, I want to plug, we do have a brand that our agency actually is a partner of, we've acquired, and that brand is Neat. So I know I've been in many webinars like you viewers right now, listening to people in the agency space, and sometimes it's like, well, why aren't you eating your own dog food? You know, if you're so good of a marketer, why don't you do this yourself instead of teaching other people? And so part of our agency model is we are in acquisition mode and growing our own businesses. So you'll actually see Neat as a case study throughout this presentation is one of those very ones. All right. So first, getting into the business foundations, we're going to talk about knowing your metrics and then knowing your business needs. So your metrics matter, but there's so many data points that marketers could look at, and there's so many marketing technology solutions that are trying to sell you access to more and more data, more ways to look at it. A lot of it is very overwhelming and candidly noise. It's not necessarily business actionable information, especially if you are not a well-seasoned marketer. So these are the 7 metrics that my CEO actually forced us to build him a dynamic dashboard for. And we've built in some AI tools in there as well that we look at constantly. We have marketing efficiency ratio, which is basically the relationship between your paid media spend and your store revenue. We've cost per new customer, conversion rate, how many people are actually purchasing once they get to your website. Average order value, how much are people spending in their first transaction or later transactions with you, can massively impact your ROI when spending on paid media. Of course, we have ad spend, which is a little more straightforward, your returning customer rate, and revenue. So these are the 7 metrics that we really live and die by as a marketing team. And these really help drive all of our decisions about how much we spend, where we spend, when we dial down, and what we need to do. But if I were to cherry pick 2 of these to just focus on, if this feels like too much, I would really focus on the marketing efficiency ratio and your revenue. At the end of the day, it's dollars in the bank so that you can continue to pay for inventory and pay for expansions that matters most. Okay, And huge disclaimer, all attribution is wrong. So I touched on this a little bit before, but when you're looking at results within ad platforms like Meta, TikTok, even Snapchat, they all have their own flaws. And this is also true when we're going out and buying third-party software that has different attribution models, or Google Analytics and things like that. So just to put all this out there to say, keep it simple. If you really can only get a handle on a few things, make sure you always know, how much revenue is coming in and how much you're actually spending on your paid media. I know this might sound really trite, but this is so important. And I think a lot of people kind of get lost in the sauce and overfixate on things like click-through rate and view throughs and all of these other things, when at the end of the day, they can be helpful in a way, but they don't tell us the bigger picture. Okay, so homework assignment 1, if you want to screenshot this and take a go at it, compile the 7 metrics that we have on here. And you might want to include 2 different versions of your marketing efficiency ratio depending on your business model. The first is, include all of your D2C store or your Shopify stores revenue and divide it over your digital spend. So that will give you kind of this ratio. Secondly, if you have an Amazon store, you might want to include that as well, because often your paid media spend that you're maybe leveraging to send people to your actual website, people might be going to Amazon instead. And so often we see this correlation between our paid media spend and other outlets. It becomes more complex if you're a CPG brand in store. So that's like a whole other tier of complexity, but I think these 2 are a really good starting place. And then look at the spreadsheet and identify, even qualitatively, what were your best months and what were your worst months, and starts to just annotate, take notes, and understand what those efficiencies looked like when business was feeling really good for you and feeling really bad for you. This is going to help you start to be familiar with your numbers and plan ahead. You can identify seasonal peaks. For example, we are in the thick, typically, of low seasonality for e-commerce. Mid-June through July is often really tricky unless you are a summer-oriented brand. Of course, there's always exceptions. But this will help you understand, when might it just be futile to really try to double down when you're in a cash flow crunch? And when should you kind of dial down to save versus what are the moments where you really wants to capitalize on that natural demand? And again, it helps you identify what a healthy marketing efficiency ratio is for you and your business so you can make decisions as the data unfolds. Okay, so this is definitely the vegetable part. And then know your business. What is your cash runway? Do you need to be profitable on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, or a quarterly basis? Some people have very real overhead needs that require constant payouts every single week. That is a very different situation than someone who is able to use their capital for a return over a quarterly basis. Are you solely dependent on paid media to drive sales? Some of you might be, and that is a problem, but we're not going to get totally into that today. But I would just say, know your business, like know what is really driving it, understand your cogs, know how competitive your niche is. Recently, I started working with a clean home cleaning brands, like non-toxic. Well, the cost to serve ads in that space is so expensive compared to some other more I guess less premium products. So if you're in a really competitive niche, that's going to massively impact what tactics you're going to do. Do you have time pressures, and are they real? A lot of people come to me saying, Jordan, we have to have 10,000 new customers by November. And then when we really get into it, the truth is they'd rather be profitable than get that volume at all costs. So these are just a few of those questions that you should really be asking yourself. And it's okay if you don't know in the moment, but I would say these are things that are really important to prioritize and have a consensus across your team. Because where I also see things go wrong is when different stakeholders are viewing these questions differently. It happens. So now we're going to transition into the profitable scaling margin, which is a great tool I love to use. So this equation starts with the lifetime value of your customer. Up to you about how you want to define that. Some people look at 3 months, 6 months, a year of how much revenue that customer brings back to their business. And then you're going to divide that over the cost per acquisition that you're seeing and the total COGS of your product. So this is our profitable scaling margin. Some people call it PSO. And it tells us what the minimum ROAS that we have to see before we can invest more capital and actually expect a return. So this is sort of a break-even point, but adding in some things so that you can make better decisions within the ad platforms. And this is going to allow you to make decisions that lead to long-term scalability. So I know I just hit you with a lot of metrics really quickly, but I do think these things are super important. I know a lot of paid media is about creative, user-generated testimonials, and all of that is really amazing. But I've just watched so many brands kind of spin out and not get the basics right so that they can even continue to invest in those important things. Okay. And then we have a homework assignment here. Find your PSM. You can take a deeper look at this later. All right. And then define your guardrails. What is the minimum revenue you need? What is your minimum ROI? And when both aren't possible, what's more important? Because often you're going to have to choose one or the other. Paid media is not a magic wand where you can get exactly what you want out of it. And anyway, we'll get into a case study about this. Okay, so have this foundation will help you not to panic because most people panic. So here are some quick hit case studies that I think that you could start to apply. So this first one is really using a simple exit intent survey. So when someone goes to close your store, a pop-up would come up and ask them, hey, why weren't you ready to buy today? This is an amazing tool. There's free ones out there. I use Hotjar a lot, which is paid, to start to get some qualitative information that when you're in a cash flow crunch, you just want to figure out, okay, why aren't people buying and what's like the thing I should prioritize first to get more revenue out of my funnel. So in this particular example, we found that gamifying the checkout flow, people were getting fatigued by the checkout flow and they didn't know how long it was going to take. So that's some information they gave us in that survey. And we were able to increase the checkouts by 13%, which is a huge win when we're spending money on ads. This one's pretty interesting because it's really just changing the titles of products and then launching bundles. But basically, merchandising on your website is just as important, if not more, as when you go to Dillard's. People are still going to Dillard's and places like that. So we titled things around the real customer problem and the real customer need. So we had the work to play kit, the date night pack. These are sweat-proof shirts, by the way. So if you don't want to be sweaty on your date, the emergency sweat kit. We were able to actually triple the average order value, the average ticket size of our transactions just by doing this, which is crazy. So this is a low-hanging fruit thing that anyone could really try that I recommend. And we also have in this one, I love this case study. We were able to increase the purchase rate by 8% simply by identifying leaks in the funnel. It's amazing how frequently this is the case, but when you're an e-com store, it is the danger zone. If above the fold, when someone opens your site, if there are links taking them to things that add steps before they'll actually buy the product. Because if they're ready to buy the product, you want to give them the most easy way to do that. So this is an example where in the header at the top, it was taking them to a page that wasn't even shoppable. It had some cool information, but instead we swapped that out and just took them to a product page, and that was way more effective. You can put stuff like that later on the page if they're not ready, if they need a quiz to kind of qualify and learn more, that's great. But we do not want to add steps to the customer journey. Okay, and then this one is simply about dialing up spend and dialing down spend. But you can see this is maybe the most high impact case study we're going to touch on today. So when we were talking about the guardrails earlier, that will help you understand, is it advantageous for me to increase my paid media right now or decrease and wait it out so I can get a higher efficiency, higher ROI and wait until the consumer behavior rebounds or maybe our inventory will replenish or things like that. So 58% higher sales year over year at higher efficiency, yes, please, every time. But this takes discipline. It takes you really understanding your numbers and following through with it and not being greedy. All the time I'm saying, be profitable. Don't be greedy. Okay, and then this is a fun one. It's just using AI to generate some imagery. You can remix existing assets. I think this is super achievable for a lot of people. This example here, we have some crazy examples with video and things like that, but I just wanted to make these really tangible, snackable, where you don't need to go hire and pay a lot of money for assets when you're in this cash flow crunch. But focus on what the users want, not what you think makes you look good as a founder, would be my hot take here. Okay, so there's more in here. You can clearly see if you want to spend more time on them later, but I want to make sure to shout out some 2 free resources that I think are going to be highly valuable to you. The first one, we've created an AI Shopify scorecard. So this is an AI tool where you put your Shopify store in, and it will identify the low-hanging fruit for you to focus on, so you can optimize those things first and not waste so much time on audits and paying all these people to tell you what to do. This will give you some quick hits and you'll understand pretty quickly. Is it messaging I need to focus on? Are there technical aspects of the site that are problematic? So anyway, big fan of this. We put a lot of effort into translating our manual processes into this automated process so more people could access it. And then the last one is the Shopify Growth School. So you'll actually see the Wayflyer webinar promoted in here as well. But we have ongoing classes every single week where we go deeper into how to scale, when to scale, all sorts of AI walkthroughs. I think this is an awesome resource for anyone who is ready to roll up their sleeves and scale it up. All right, Mary Kate.
Okay, thank you. When I found out that Growth Hit had their own store, I couldn't get over. I think I interrupted Jordan in the middle of what she was saying, and I was like, I think that is so cool to really put your money where your mouth is and work on some of these growth strategies, ultimately in an effort to be able to provide your customers with better advice that's rooted in like boots on the ground, real world application. I just think it's so cool, and something that I'd never heard of before. So I love those case studies. I think they tell such a nice story. And now we're going to shift gears a little bit. So global expansion is very top of mind for a lot of brands, especially as our general economy turns slightly more global. I know I get TikTok ads from products that are not from America, and sometimes they're from Canada, sometimes they're from Europe. I get a lot of Korean skincare ads, and our world is becoming smaller, and global expansion is increasingly more important. We would be remiss if we talked about this without mentioning tariffs. So we are going to touch on that. I know it's so important to pretty much everyone. So I'm very excited to dig into this. Brian, I'm going to hand it over to you to kick us off here and talk to us about logistics.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, for U.S. brands especially, this is something that I've been on a soapbox on for a very long time, that U.S. brands, typically when they start off, they're only thinking about the United States market. But when a brand overseas starts off, they're often thinking of the world from day one. And so a lot of brands actually struggle to cross that leap or go through that Rubicon because everything was built on the back of really domestic systems and the domestic supply chain. But that's why you see a lot of international brands sell into the U.S. so much, because they've been opening stores and selling online for decades. And it was very few and far between that you would have a U.S. headquartered brand or retailer that actually focused a lot internationally. And I'll use Abercrombie and Fitch as an example because it's public, it's in their 10K. More than half their sales is outside the United States. Did you know that? So if you want to look at the brands that are successful, they're the ones that don't put all their eggs in one basket, and that basket is the U.S. market, which is why I am starting with an update on the United States tariff situation, which is an ever-evolving news item that is impacting brands globally that sell into the U.S., but especially hitting hard U.S. brands that are selling here in the U.S. So a lot has been talked about. A lot is going to be talked about. More news is likely to drop, but ultimately we wanted to give an outline and overview of really what are these tariffs, because it's very unlike the first Trump administration when a lot of the tariff talk was focused on Section 301, but also 201 and 232. All of these tariff statutory provisions are different. And the reason why that's important is because sometimes they cancel each other out. Sometimes you have to stack them one on top of another. So I'll get into that here in a little bit. But ultimately, That was back in the first Trump administration. Now with the second Trump administration, you do see a lot more activity. And so this is a rough timeline of how it all started back in February and March, and ultimately up to what was stated as Liberation Day, April 2nd, with a very long list of countries with new tariff and duty rates, of which many were reversed. But then, of course, now letters have been sent out, and it seems like these numbers are actually very close to the numbers that were announced on April 2nd, which will be in effect as of August 1st. So anyways, you go back to early March. This is when the IEEPA tariffs were now being introduced. So these were, IEEPA is a statutory provision which basically endows the executive branch with emergency powers to combat things like national security, of which the fentanyl crisis was used, especially with Canada, Mexico, and China. But then the trade deficits with other countries were used as the justification for the IEEPA statutory provision. The reason why IEEPA is important versus 301, 232, and 201 is because there are a lot of things that are not applicable. There's a lot of rules around things like foreign trade zones. Things like de minimis become ineligible. And we'll talk about de minimis because that's really important for brands. So a lot of these things are, let's just say the loopholes are closing, whereas you as a company had maybe a little bit more to combat or at least make a case as it relates to the impact of the 301, 232, or 201 tariffs on your business. I'll give you an example of the differences here, because 232 is very specific to commodities. And so, we've seen various announcements, especially recently as it relates to copper, but ultimately steel and aluminum content was the big news back in April and in May. And the reason why that was big news is, if you have any steel or aluminum content in the items that you're importing, you actually pay that 25% duty of just the value of the steel and aluminum on top of the duties and tariffs you're paying on the item itself. But in some cases, the 232 cancels out other provisions. So it can be very, very confusing how all of this stacks up. Even licensed customs brokers that have to take a really difficult exam, it's like passing the bar exam, are making mistakes. And so I think it's incumbent upon every company that is getting sticker shock as it relates to tariffs that they're paying now versus what they used to be paying, to make sure that you're working with a customs broker that is actually doing it the right way. And getting a second opinion never hurts, especially in this situation, because you could actually be outlaying more cash than you need to, because you can certainly get a refund if you spend, and you can even get a binding resolution to change even the HS code that you're using. I'll give you an example. We had one company, and if anyone worked in retail like I did, you knew at the end of the day, you had to put all your cash in a bag that had a zipper and a lock. Well, that was being imported as bag. But did you know that that could actually be also called a safe, which it is? And if you get a binding resolution from US Customs, the duty rate for a safe is a hell of a lot lower than the duty rate for a bag. So all these things come into play. Make sure you're working with the right partner as it relates to your customs broker and the person helping you import goods into the United States, because this is confusing just looking at all of this right now on the screen. And especially if you're importing from China, this can have an outsized impact, especially even going back, what you were paying back in April, May, and what you could be paying here after August 1st. So this is all just to say that these are not going away. Likely the tariff numbers are going to go up, not down. But that's going to create different pressures. The good news is all of your competitors are in the same situation. So that's the one good news. So now it's a matter of, we say in logistics that companies don't compete, supply chains compete. So let's talk about a few ways to make your supply chain a little bit more competitive, because these are massive headwinds that everyone is experiencing that's going to be eating into a lot of the cash that you'd like to deploy to better grow your business, right? So now we're going to go ahead and talk about tariff mitigation. Okay. Now, tariff mitigation, this is something that we're seeing across the board. This is the actual one area where U.S. brands have an advantage. And what is that? Well, because of the first Trump administration and the introduction of the 301 tariffs, a lot of companies have already diversified their sourcing, which was only accelerated during COVID when you had a lot of uncertainty around when factories might be shut down, potentially crippling your supply chain. So a lot of companies implemented a China plus one strategy. But guess what? Australian companies, European companies did not. They did not diversify. And so now, there's a lot of attention on China, a lot of the focus on the high duty rates, the elimination of de minimis. It all centers on China and Hong Kong. So if you're a U.S. brand and you've already diversified, yes, you're going to see tariffs in countries like Vietnam, Mexico, other countries like Thailand, but ultimately, it's not nearly going to be as high or onerous as China. So you've got a little bit of an advantage there if you've already diversified where you're sourcing. But if you haven't, this has to be the first area to look at if you're not already. Diversity of sourcing and diversity of really anything since the pandemic reduces risk. And there are situations when it can add cost. I'll give you an example. We have a brand that decided to source 20% of their items from Mexico. They cost them 3 times as much versus China. But guess what? They got their items in 3 weeks, not 3 months. The lead time was reduced significantly. So the cash conversion cycle actually increases. So yes, price per unit goes up, but you have to look at the total picture to better understand the impact in your finances, because that could very well be the right strategy for you. Leveraging de minimis, let's talk about number 2. You can still import into the United States B2C orders to your customers as long as the country of origin is not China or Hong Kong. And we're seeing companies, even today, knowing that in the recent big, beautiful bill that was passed, codified the ending of de minimis in July of 2027, so 2 years from now. A lot of companies are acting, and they're setting up fulfillment partners in Mexico. This is something we're doing today in Tijuana for brands that at least want to get a competitive advantage and take advantage of the lower cost model, because it can be a third of the cost to store and fulfill your goods in Tijuana than it is into any warehouse in the United States. And this is especially particular for fashion apparel brands because fashion apparel oftentimes had higher duty amounts or they were subject to other provisions that made it so that they were paying more in duties. And then you can just ship across the border into San Diego and across the United States as a domestic shipment. This is not going away yet. It will go away, but for now, this is a competitive differentiator and is highly recommended for brands that do want to get that edge, at least for the next year or two, while this window is still open. And then the last one, which I think is really ultimately the biggest opportunity, especially in partnering with a company like Wayflyer, is expanding internationally. So expanding internationally is got to be on your priority list. Companies that have all their eggs in the U.S. basket right now are in for some sticker shock as it relates to these tariffs. Expanding internationally is got to be the next phase of any brand's growth. So yeah, I'm just going to outline basically the quick steps to demystify how expanding internationally can actually be just as easy as launching on Amazon. Is it easy? No. But is it too daunting not to try? Absolutely not. It can't happen. It's part of a lot of brand strategies. So the first and foremost is to target. Identify the key markets to start. The most common countries that we see brands starting with are Canada, UK, Australia, and the European Union, and for different reasons. So you might make furniture that's kind of Nordic design. Well, you might want to start in the European Union. Or if you've got something that you don't want to do translations in your website yet, you could test out the UK, even before Canada. Because remember, you have to translate everything into French. So, Australia can be actually even really easy to get to from the United States, easier than you think. It can be a great testing market as well. But start with an easier country and get the kinks out with an easy country. And in fact, we helped a brand in the UK expand into the US because what they did first is they shipped from their home market. They shipped from their home market. So we helped them ship from the UK into the US. But they had a formula. Their formula was this. They worked with a digital marketing agency, as you heard from Jordan, because that's really critical and key here. Remember, logistics, marketing, executive all have to talk to each other. Now, if everyone talks to each other, this can really work. So what they did is they said, we're going to spend this much for this amount of time. And if we reach scale at the end of this plan and program, then we're going to decide to invest in new inventory and position that inventory in country, because that is a very costly operation. But what's even more costly is if you don't know if your item is going to sell in that country. So it's better to test first from where you're already storing your inventory, your home country. And guess what? They did hit critical mass. And currently today, we do fulfill for them out of our Chicago facility. And that brand is actually called Vivo Life. It's a vegan protein powder. So global expansion can work. Other brands outside the US are already doing it here. So why don't you go and hit them in their home market? So first is targeting. Second is partnering. Find the right partners like Wayfinder, because that can make the difference between success and failure. There's other software companies out there that can actually do the currency conversion and the translation for you, and even take on compliance risk on your behalf. There's a whole host of them that are out there, and they can really make it a turnkey solution for you to expand in other markets around the world. And then, like I said, start shipping from your home country. You don't have to go and open up a warehouse in another country. Start shipping from here. Now, are those shipments going to be loss leaders potentially for a certain amount of time? Yes, but make sure you have a budget and make sure you allocate and you understand what your definition of success is. But thankfully, now that the pandemic is mostly over, international shipping is not as costly as it used to be. So you might be surprised to find out how easy it can be to ship to other countries, especially if you're based here in the US. And then the last is boom, then you expand. Then you expand, you put your inventory in that country, that region, and you see your sales scale. And this is where we've seen brands get really successful, the ones that are selling in multiple markets around the world. We went live with one client in 5 sites around the world: Asia, Europe, North America. Think global, because right now there's a bit of risk in the US market, a lot of challenges. But again, all your competitors are experiencing the same thing. So leverage things like de minimis and go to markets they're not in. So dominate where you can. And with that, I'll conclude.
Oh, I did the classic talking on mute. That was fantastic. I think shipping and logistics and expanding outside of the United States, just when you say it, it sounds so daunting. And I think one of the takeaways here is that it's not, it's doable. It's been done before. It'll be done again. There are providers like Seko who make this process simple and have the experience to know how to make the most of the situation right now, even as it changes. Because, like you said, a lot of these things are not going away. They are still changing, though. And who knows what it's going to be next week or on August 1st. And we have to adapt to the situation. So thankfully, we have good partners that help us do that. So we're going to jump into our key takeaways here. We've got 3. I'm going to boil them down. There were so many between Jordan and Brian and all the things that they were saying about growing marketing, converting better, expanding to new markets. So these are just 3. There were plenty more. So understand your financing options. When you're early on, a cash advance can offer flexible repayments. But as you stabilized, a term loan might fit your needs a little bit better. And then when you're looking for even more predictability and more seamless way to access that capital, consider rolling financing options. The next one is know your business. Jordan, it was hard to pick. There were a lot of takeaways from your section, but you talked about eating your vegetables, and I was kind of giggling because it's a funny way to say, like, get your nutrients, get your foundations, get what you need first. And we have to cover it. And that's knowing your business, understand your metrics, um, know what levers you can pull to get the numbers to move in the way that you want them. We're too mature in the game to be throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And then lastly, when we need to like be thinking global first, expand to new markets. And with all this uncertainty, expanding is actually going to be your friend. And it might sound counterintuitive, but this is how you diversify. This is how you get your eggs in multiple baskets. So expansion is key. So those are our key takeaways. I'm going to open it up to Q&A, and my colleague Ellen is helping me out in the back end. She's going to serve up any questions that we get. I know we had one question come through, which was, how can we contact Wayflyer? And I will say, we'll be in touch with the recording and everything after this webinar, and our teams will be in touch. I think I can say the same for the Growth Hit and Seko teams as well. So that's how you can get in touch with us. And I will give it a moment for any other questions to come through. And if we don't, we can end a little bit early and give people 5 minutes back. So we'll end there. I want to thank everyone so much for joining today. We really appreciate your time. Hopefully you learned something great. And thank you to Jordan and Brian for joining us. And we will see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.